Hello everyone, my name is Dar'ya and I'm from 733rd group. The topic of my coursework is abbreviation in modern English. The first slide, please. The actuality of the research can be determined by the following factors in the scientific literature, and there is no clear definition of the status of abbreviations, and their uniform classification is not presented. Abbreviation processes in language require new research methods, theoretical understanding, and more accurate systematization. The translation of abbreviation is still controversial and therefore requires a more detailed study. The scientific novelty is a lack of scientifically sound recommendation on this issue. Dictionaries of abbreviation and acronyms of newspapers and journalistic style. Manuals for translating abbreviation complicate the work on text. Their translation creates great difficulties in reading various texts, and it makes it impossible to teach foreign languages for students to implement the principle of studying special terminology or in relation to speech situationality. The object matter is abbreviated lexical units. Next slide, please. The subject matter is peculiarities of the formation of abbreviations and acronyms and methods of their translation in modern English, in particular in the field of aviation. The aim of the research is to identify the essence of abbreviated lexical units and features of the process of forming abbreviations in modern English and to establish the main methods and features of their translation, in particular in the field of aviation. Next slide, please. According to the aim of the following objectives are defined: to reveal the essence of the concept of abbreviation, to determine the reasons for the appearance and spread of abbreviation in English, to study the meaning of abbreviations and acronyms in the vocabulary of modern English and consider the impact on the language system as a whole, analyze the main classifications of abbreviations, to explore the main ways of translating English abbreviations into Ukrainian, consider their features of use and translation of abbreviation in the field of aviation. Next slide, please. The theoretical value is to consider the concept of the word formation as a way or to replenish the vocabulary of the language. Basic ways of word formation in modern English, as well as considering the concept of abbreviation, history of abbreviation, and their classification in modern English. The practical value is consideration of the main ways of translating English abbreviations into Ukrainian and the difficulties that arise when deciphering them, as well as research of the peculiarities of the use and translation of abbreviation in the field of aviation. Next slide, please. New words as well as new meaning of the words appear when there is a need to name new objects or to express a slightly different attitude to already known objects or to describe them in some other way. New words are created from existing elements of language, words bases for word forming affixes. According to existing models, continuous replenishment of the lexical system of language with new words is carried out in different ways. Enriching the vocabulary of modern English is through word formation, changing the meaning of the word, and borrowing. Please tap. Word formation is one of the most important and most productive ways to replenish the vocabulary of the language, which is realized on the principle of change in morphological composition of the existing lexical basis, or by moving the basis to another paradigm of word formation, word change. Next slide, please. The phenomenon of word formation is considered from two positions, synchrony and diachrony. In the first approach, word formation is studied in a synchronous section of speech. There is the main focus is on the connections between words. Diachronic analysis of the word formation allows us to look at the historical process that accompanied this phenomenon throughout the formation of the words. The semantics of affixes are also of considerable interest to scholars. In this regard, different opinions are expressed, which as a result are reduced to the three main statements. The first one, the affix doesn't carry the independence, but only helps to form the outer side of the word. The second one, the affix performs only the role of a conductor moving to the words from one lexical and grammatical class to another. And the third one, the affix can express a wide range of lexical and grammatical meanings. Next slide, please. Today, the main concept of this affix is main carrier of words formation meaning. There are the affixes by location in the word, prefixes and suffixes. By region, original prefixes be, on, miss, suffixes er, full, hood, nes, and borrowed prefixes de, ex, anti, suffixes able, ac, eyes. Belonging to the part of the speech, nouns. Prefixes pres, sub, dis, suffixes full, less, ish, etc. Verb prefixes dis, re, mis, suffixes ion, er, mens. Adjectives prefixes an, anti, re. Suffixes ish, nes, hood. By semantic load, affixes with the meaning of similarity are l, its, crypto, neo, with the meaning of the negation, this, in, less, with the meaning of the person, an, en, e, with the value of the number, b, monosemi. By productivity and activity, anti-fascism, anti-union, co-author, co-operator, extraterritorial, extraordinary, air, sleeper, receiver, able, eatable, readable, speakable. By transporting, converting ability. Next slide, please. As there is a great variety of models for reducing words and phrases which indicate the versatility of the phenomenon itself. This word-true model reflects the tendency to rationalize language and to save language effort. There are such basic types of abbreviation as truncation, words emergence, and abbreviations. The common abbreviation in English are the names of governments, agencies and positions: CO, Colonial Office; PM, Prime Minister; new agencies and broadcasting companies; AR, Associated Press; UPI, United Press Informational; UCI, United States Information Agency; military blocs, NATO; North Atlantic Treaty Organization, SEATO; Southeast Treaty Organization; Air Transport Agency, BOC, British Overseas Airways Corporation, TWVA, Transport Airlines. The next slide, please. Choosing the appropriate method of transmitting abbreviation in the Ukrainian language, it's necessary to pay attention to the way the author of the source text represents the same abbreviation of the meaning he uses to bring the reader's attention, its connotative and semantic content. There are the following ways to translate the abbreviations and acronyms. Search for the appropriate abbreviation in Ukrainian equivalent translation. The translation of such abbreviation is usually not complicated and understandable for audience. Search for the full form of reduction. This method of translation is used only in the absence of the appropriate abbreviation in the Ukrainian language. Letter translation and transliteration, sometimes with the explanation of its origin. Creating a new word, descriptive translation, abbreviations without translation. Therefore, the most appropriate ways to translate from English into Ukrainian are to search for the full form of the abbreviation, tracing, or decipher the abbreviation using a free combination of words explication, because abbreviations are not as common and popular in Ukraine as in English. Next slide, please. The translator should pay special attention to the abbreviation of the text, take into account the structure of abbreviations and context because often it is because of the lack of the proper translation can lose the main content of the whole text. One of the ways to translate abbreviations of aviation terminology from English into Ukrainian is to create a new abbreviations of the basis of Ukrainian translation. For example, the following abbreviations: VFR, Visual Flight Rules. Into Ukrainian, it has an equivalent ПВП, Правила візуальних польотів. A significant number of abbreviations and acronyms in the field of aviation has led to the development of rules for their reproduction in the Ukrainian language. The first one, translation by the appropriate abbreviation. The second one, translation into a corresponding form of the word or phrase. Please tap. The next one. Tracing, transcoding, transcription or transliteration of the abbreviation. The fourth one, tracing the full origin form of the corresponding reduction. Please step. The next one. The descriptive translation. Next one. Creating a new abbreviation in the language of translation. Next one. The method of direct borrowing. Next slide. Abbreviations should be noted. Let's look at the diagram 1. At this diagram, we can see that the most used type of abbreviation is descriptive translation that has 27%, then goes transliteration 23%, then 19% has tracing, then goes selection of equivalent 17% and transcoding 14%. Next slide, please. Abbreviations should be noted as one of the most common ways in which aviation terms appear. Thus, in modern aviation terminology, there are two main types of abbreviations. The first one, abbreviations in the initial types, that is divided. Please. It is divided into abbreviations formed by the initial letters of words, and the second one, abbreviations formed from combinations of initial sounds of words. And the second type, abbreviations of the compound type, formed by the first syllables of the word. Next slide, please. Let's look at the diagram 2. We can see that the most used abbreviation in aviation terms are abbreviation formed by the initial letters. That has 58%. The next one has compound type 30% and formed from combinations of initial sounds that has 12%. Next slide, please. To sum up, there are a number of difficulties in translating abbreviations of aviation terms. First, abbreviation of the certain subject in the case of aviation. May coincide in form with well-known abbreviations, but have different meanings. Second, even among the abbreviations of aviation terms, there is a homonymy. Conditions for the adequate translation of English aviation terms are ensuring the adequate translation of terminological unit that corresponds to the origin text, presence of each terminological unit in the terminological system of both languages. Also, in order to make a correct translation, a translator must have a sufficient amount of knowledge both in the field of science and technology in which he works and in the field of terminology. In the field of aviation, the main method reproduction of abbreviation in in the Ukrainian language have been developed translation by appropriate abbreviation, translation of corresponding full forms of the word phrase, transcoding, transcription or transliteration reduction, tracing of the full original form of the corresponding reduction, descriptive translation, creating a new abbreviation in the word in the language of translation, direct borrowing methods. The next slide. Thank you for your attention.